fooling around. I am here mainly to vent. My wife and I were married for nearly 15 years. It was an okay marriage, but my wife twice had affairs. The second time I left and we were separated for a year before giving it another try because we had a child. That was about 7 years ago. For the past several years, it seemed like things were going good. After having some money issues due to the economy collapsing in the 2000s, we both had steady jobs, were paying off debt, had a second child, and things seemed to be going good. Lo and behold, not so much. We moved back close to my wife's hometown to be near family. My parents and her family live in the same town we do, and she ran into her high school sweetheart, who she had an affair with within the first year of us being married, and they carried on a long-term affair. I honestly didn't see the signs until it was far too late and they had already been plotting to stay together for the long term. We talked in January about divorcing and I finally filed this summer. There was a brief flirtation with staying together for the kids, but it was obvious it wasn't going to work. I obviously don't trust her, she clearly wants to be with this other guy, etc. Fast forward to today and she has bought a new house, boyfriend supplied the down payment, and moved out. We're splitting custody of the kids 50-50 while the case snakes its way through the court system. I am here really to vent because my friends and family basically just say I should be happy to be out of the relationship because it was toxic and she didn't treat me with respect. Those things are true, but I also think even ending toxic relationships takes a toll on you, plus I am losing time with my kids through no fault of my own. Don't get me wrong, I am not the perfect spouse, but I wasn't abusive or mean or withheld bonding or anything else. In fact, my ex flat out said she had no complaints about our marriage, she just thinks she is destined to be with this guy. Anyway, I am here because I know I am better off getting out of the marriage, but I also feel angry about how this played out. About losing time with my kids. I feel resentful that my ex gets to move on with her life with no repercussions. I feel hurt and rejected after being treated like an old shoe that can easily be replaced. I think my friends and family that know my situation just assume I should snap my fingers and be happy to move on. I think there is gray area where I can be happy to be out of a toxic relationship, but also sad and angry about how all this went down. They just don't want to talk about that latter half. Anyway, that was probably a much longer intro than most people give. I tend to be long-winded. But I am hoping that I can just share how I feel on here and people can relate. The relationship ending is not necessarily a bad thing, but elements of it still hurt. Over time it will get easier. She just moved out about 2 months ago and even though we talked about the divorce at the beginning of the year, a lot of this is still fresh. So I do think over time it will become easier and more normal. Part of the issue, for me, is that I still have to see my ex to trade off the kids and things of that nature. In the past, if I broke up with someone, I just didn't see them anymore. In some ways, I think that made it easier to move on. Now I have to still see this person who treated me wrong and I have to be at least cordial in front of the kids because I don't want to poison that well. It's an odd balancing act that, again, I think will get easier over time. That being said, I think it is easier for her to be around me because she chose this and I don't think has any second thoughts about what she did. I kind of find that annoying too. I do think I am trying to convince myself that it was okay outside of the two affairs and that is a mistake. It wasn't okay and I allowed emotions and the fear of starting over to cloud my judgment. The perspective you are talking about is really necessary to move forward, I think. I think it is one of those things where intellectually I know it is better to just move on and not carry any animosity about what she is up to, but then there are moments where emotions kick in. It honestly isn't even jealousy because I think the relationship needed to end. I think it is more resentment and a feeling of rejection. Over time, I think those will dissipate because, as I said, I know they aren't helpful and don't change the situation. If anything, it holds me back from moving on. Filed for divorce this summer, my STBX moved out around Labor Day and we've lived apart since. We have 2 kids together and I keep communication to a minimum and try to keep it focused on just the kids. Ex was having an affair and wanted to leave for the other guy. I filed just because she tends to drag out decisions and I didn't want to wait for her. Plus, I wanted to fill out the paperwork so there were no surprises, etc. Long story short, once my ex first moved out, I definitely felt sad. Sad about the future not working out as I had imagined, sad for the kids. Fast forward a few months later and I don't really feel that way anymore. The relationship was toxic, she had cheated before, is very self-absorbed, I didn't stand up for myself enough, and it needed to end. The kids still have their struggles and I'm not sure how things will play out once she introduces this guy into the mix at some point, but I think the relationship ending was really for the best. I guess the thing I am seeking advice for, though, is that on the one hand I am really past, at least I think I am, mourning the relationship. My ex obviously didn't respect me, I don't think I respected myself enough either, and it's better to move on. That being said, on the other hand, I still can't but help feel rejected on a human level. I guess this is the classic I don't want this person, but I'm annoyed they don't want me scenario. Have other people dealt with this while going through a divorce or breakup of a long-term relationship? I've gone through breakups before, but I just never saw the people again and they didn't end due to cheating, but just because the relationship had run its course so parts of this are new to me, I am definitely down with minimum contact and there is a 0% chance of her coming back or me wanting her back. I know some people will read that and roll their eyes, but I really have zero interest in getting back together with her. Ever. I have zero interest in one last roll in the hay with her either. Just no thanks. The reality is that I'd already given her a second chance, so there's no way I'd give her a third. I know this is a blessing in disguise. She is definitely on the let's be friends wagon. We have 50-50 custody, and when I drop the kids off with her, she is constantly asking if I want a glass of wine or to stay for dinner. Mind you, I really don't think she's trying to keep me in the background as a backup option romantically. I think he genuinely thinks we can remain friends. We were friends before dating, despite the way she's treated me. I always, and I mean always, say no thanks, hug the kids, and leave. I am not so much bothered by the emotions of being discarded anymore. I know that is her failing, not mine. I know I deserve better. I know she isn't worth crying over. I'm sure there will still be days where that is not true and I'll feel rejected, but the vast majority of the time I don't feel that way anymore. She doesn't deserve my friendship. Friendships are reserved for people worthy of them, and she is not worthy. Half a year later, went before the judge via Zoom and everything was accepted and I am officially divorced, single. The final paperwork to sign is supposed to come next week. I kept thinking that I was going to feel sad or something, but it just never happened. As I said to one of my best friends, the court hearing felt like a formality at this point. My ex told me she was having an affair and wanted a divorce back in January 2021. We've been living apart since that spring, and we've been living separate lives since the spring, early summer. At this point, any level of sadness I felt has washed away. I'll be honest and say I do still feel angry about all of this, but most of that is about having to split time with my kids and my ex just discarding me like trash. But both of those will go away because I know my kids are better off not witnessing a toxic marriage, and I am better off out of a relationship with a person who treated me like that. The best thing about the divorce being finalized is that the parenting plan is now legally binding. My ex's new boyfriend lives about an hour west of here, so if she tries to move, she'll have to go to court, and every lawyer I consulted with was sure she'd lose because she has no grounds to move them away from me. From family, our kids have 2 grandparents and an aunt and uncle in town and out of their school district, so I am glad that has been made legal. Also, I am happy to have this behind me. Oh, I still have to co-parent with her and all of that, but I am okay with doing that. But the paperwork and court filing and all of that, I am happy to be done with. Honestly, the process ended up being pretty smooth because my ex just wanted the divorce to move on just as much as I did, so she waived alimony. Never fought about custody, etc., but it was still stressful at times, so I am happy to be on the other side of the legal proceedings. I definitely try to limit contact with her as much as possible, and 99% of our communication is by text. Every once in a while she calls me. I never call her, usually about a schedule change with the kids or an issue at school. She definitely has tried to be friends, and I have no interest for the reasons you state. Friends do not treat people the way she treated me. I have no problem being civil, but I see no point in being friendly. I am actually having dinner with some people tonight, and we're having a nice bottle of wine to celebrate the divorce. I am also meeting up with 2 of my best friends on Friday for drinks to celebrate as well. While I'm not sure this constitutes a ceremony per se, it is a way to celebrate moving forward. A month later, so my ex and I separated in the spring of 2021. I filed for divorce in August. She moved out for good around Labor Day, and our divorce was finalized last month. We have 2 children, 13 and 7. When we first told the kids we were separating, the youngest, who was 6 at the time, didn't quite understand what was happening and had some moments of acting out, being clingy, asking questions, but has honestly taken it mostly in stride. She has always been closer to me, and that has remained throughout. For example, we have 50-50 custody, and they spend a week with each of us at a time. On my ex's weeks, the youngest often asks to stay at my house. We still live in the same town, whereas she never asks to stay with my ex on my weeks. At any rate, overall, the youngest seems to be handling it pretty well. The oldest has been up and down. My ex had an affair for at least 2 years before she was found out and we separated. As far as I know, she is still with the affair partner, who was an ex-boyfriend, but has not introduced him to the kids or anything. In any event, my in-laws were all very upset about this, and, unfortunately, my mother-in-law told our oldest that the separation was my ex's fault. I do not think she told our oldest that an affair was occurring, but the overall blame for the separation and divorce was placed squarely on my ex. Of course, we all know that is not the thing you should tell children, but my former mother-in-law was cheated on by my former Phil, and I think she sees a lot of him in my ex. Anyway, due to that, our oldest had a lot of animosity toward my ex, didn't want to go to her house at all, refused to decorate her bedroom, was rude, etc., all sort of typical teenager things, but amplified due to the separation. However, I have noticed in the last month or so that something has changed. I still have a good relationship with my oldest, and there are times where my ex and my oldest butt heads, but a lot of that animosity is gone, and I would go so far as to say my oldest favors my ex. Again, we still have a good relationship, but she texts my ex when she is at my house, but doesn't reach out to me often when she is at my ex's house. Obviously, I want my oldest to have a good relationship with her mom because, well, it's her mom, but I guess I am just curious if others have seen this ebb and flow with kids and how they react to their parents post-divorce. My ex is definitely manipulative and definitely wants to be the favorite parent. I will say that my ex and my oldest have always been close, so I do think that plays a role. My oldest is a girl and is going through puberty and all that. She feels more inclined to talk to my ex about some of that stuff. The only reason I don't think my ex has introduced the new guy is, as I said above, she is very much the type of person who wants to be the favorite, and I think she wants to avoid introducing the new guy as long as possible only because she thinks our kids will react negatively. Now, I readily admit I could be totally wrong about that and she may have introduced the new guy, but I don't think so. Not to say it isn't coming, though. As for your comment, Lisa Diane, I am pretty much committed to playing the long game and hoping my kids see through my ex as adults. I hope that my ex is a good mom to them as kids, but I also hope they understand as adults that if there is any instability to their childhood, it was caused by her. I've certainly seen people post on here where their exes manipulate their kids and ruin the relationship, but I am hoping that doesn't happen here. The only thing I have told the kids is the more generic sometimes people fall out of love type discussion, emphasizing that nothing the kids did had any bearing on me and my ex divorcing. I know that at 13 my oldest might understand what an affair is and all, but I feel like I don't want to muddy the waters and go down that road. I spoke to a few child development folks and they said not to share that information until the kids are much older and, even then, not to bring it up unless they ask or it is pertinent somehow. I don't have any inclination that my ex is going off the rails. Although I have nothing but disdain for my ex, I am very cognizant of not saying anything negative about her in front of the kids and co-parenting with her as easily as I can. I just keep my interactions with her to a minimum, and those interactions are only related to the kids, so I think that helps. If I had to be around her too much, I think it would just irritate me, so I just avoid that. I'm just trying to do my best for the kids. I do think I need to remind myself not to take it personally. That is definitely a good point. Most of the time I am really good about that, but not always. The vast majority of the time I just try to be the same dad as I was before all this and be the same person I was so the kids see they still have that stability with me and I'll always be there for them. I am glad to read that all of this is pretty normal, which I suspected it was. We'd been separated for over a year after my ex admitted she was having an affair with an ex-boyfriend and wanted to be with him. We've got 2 kids, 13 and 7. When we split, we didn't tell the kids about the affair because the child therapist we consulted thought it was a bad idea and we should really just emphasize that the divorce wasn't due to them. We still loved them, etc. I was okay with that. Fast forward to this weekend and my ex tells me she wanted to give me a heads up that she was introducing our kids to her boyfriend and wanted to let me know in case the kids asked me any question. This is my ex's week with the kids. We trade off every Friday, so I have not seen them yet, but my question is that either of them come to me with a question about how my ex and this guy met or what I think about it or anything like that. Am I allowed to be honest now that she introduced him? Mind you, I'm not saying I want to be vindictive and trash the guy, but I also don't want to lie to my kids if they were to point blank ask me if I knew when they met, how long they've been together, etc. Granted, I'm not convinced my kids will ask because the 13-year-old is very guarded and quiet, and the 7-year-old might be too young to ask. But I figured folks on here have been in similar situations, so I was just curious to get people's thoughts. I am very certain the kids know the divorce was not about them. If they think anything, they just think something very generic like their mom and I fell out of love. But of course that always begets the question of why did my parents fall out of love? Well, it was because she was screwing an ex for 2 years, but I've held my tongue on that because they haven't asked, and I don't think I should just volunteer that to be vindictive. My ex has contacted me a few times, although it has gone steadily down, about things not related to the kids, but I only communicate about things related to the kids and pretty much only by text. I just have no interest in engaging with her. I've found that has helped the moving forward process a lot. Kids are both definitely mine. Testing has been done. As for the question about wishing the kids were with the AP, I'm not sure. My ex thinks I am a good father and I don't think she's just blowing smoke. I think she knew for years I was the better parent. That being said, I do think she probably wishes she could turn back time and run off with this ex 15 years ago instead of getting married to me. She probably does regret not having children with him, but she has never said that to me, so I am just guessing. I don't know that much about the AP, only what I have heard from my ex's family, and that information is mostly old because they first dated like 20 years ago. All I know is he was also married when this affair started 2+ years ago and got divorced himself due to it, has 1 kid of his own. From what I understand from my ex's family, he was a bit of a nut as a teenager and guy in his early 22s, was very controlling and possessive, and is the exact opposite of my ex in a lot of ways. They are aligned differently on politics. He is very religious, she is not. He is a teetotaler, she is not. I think he is pretty financially secure and that is definitely appealing to my ex whether she cares to admit it or not. The only other thing I know about him, and to some extent my ex, is that he is convinced they are soulmates, are meant to be together, etc. That is partly why he had no issue destroying his marriage and our marriage to pursue her. All that being said, I have no idea if he will be a good step-parent to my kids if him and my ex get married. I honestly have no clue. I think he would try, but from everything I know, he is radically different from me, so I'm not sure how well his parenting style and personality and my kids would mesh. As far as I understand, they met him this weekend. So that has already happened. I wasn't going to go up to my kids and say, I heard you met your mom's new boyfriend. How was that? But if they came to me with questions, I felt like I would answer them honestly, but also age appropriately. I'm willing to admit that I'm angry with my ex for how she handled all this, but I'm also totally fine with the relationship ending. But I have no interest in slandering her just to make her look bad to the kids. She's still their mom and I'm not trying to muddy those waters. I think some people read my opus and thought I was saying I just wanted to trash her given the opportunity. That isn't my intention. It's more like if one of the kids asked if I knew about the boyfriend, I'd be honest and say I did, and that was why the divorce happened. The 13-year-old keeps things pretty close to the vest. She seems like she has adapted pretty well considering how angry and upset she was at first. The 7-year-old has definitely shown some signs of regression and is really clingy with me. Don't know how she acts around my ex, but I know she is super clingy with me and often acts like she needs help with things she really doesn't, just to get the attention. My ex has introduced her AP to the kids and had him around them at least twice. Since she introduced him, my youngest has already told my ex that she knows her new boyfriend is why we got divorced. I don't get the sense my ex tried to disagree with her. My oldest has not said anything about it to me, and I don't know how she reacted because I haven't asked. The only thing my youngest has said to me is to ask if I was going to have a girlfriend soon. I was honest with her and told her it wasn't something I was looking for right now, but it might happen eventually. That is all that has been said to this point. My comment: these are all a part of the progress. The young ones will figure out one way or the other. Focus on getting some stability, then you can start planning your next relationship. Story 2. My husband and I will have been married 4 years this June. We are both 27 years old. Met in college, we were both sophomores. I took a gap year between high school and college to earn some money, and he flunked out of his very first semester freshman year due to getting involved in illegal drugs and the party scene, so he had to retake that year after he got cleaned up. We were 21 when we met. We moved in together about 6 months later. I worked my way through college working a night shift at a supermarket, so I ended up with only about $8,000 worth of student loans. His parents paid for his full bachelor's degree and his rent at his college apartment where we lived. I paid for our food and utility bills. We graduated at 23 and got married 2 months later. I immediately got an entry-level job in the field I had gotten my degree in, nonprofit management. He decided to go to grad school, software engineering. His parents understandably wouldn't pay for that, and he ended up with $80,000 worth of student loans over the course of 2 years of grad school. He's now been out of grad school for 2 years. He has not even tried to find a job in his field. He has no ambition as far as I can tell and seems perfectly happy working as the assistant manager of the convenience store he's worked at since he was 16, making about $14 an hour. I make about $35,000 a year as the social media manager of a locally based charitable organization. I'm busy paying off both my student loans and his because he doesn't make enough money to pay his, but he went out and bought himself a brand new Jeep Ranger last September, while my Ford Ranger is a 1998 beater with over 200,000 miles on it. We've lived with his parents now for 4 years because we can't afford to move out. Rentals are really expensive here due to more people than there are rental properties. I'd love to move to a bigger city where I can make more money while staying in the nonprofit sector, but he doesn't want to move away from his family and friends. We don't have kids, nor do we plan to have them until we're settled and in a place of our own. We've talked about waiting until we are in our 30s, but he doesn't seem to be making any progress towards finding a job that will let us get our own place. In the 2 years since he graduated, he has not sent out one single resume or gone to a single interview. Instead, he hangs out at the convenience store where he works long past the end of his shift, even though he doesn't get paid to do so. Then he comes home and sleeps pretty much the rest of the time. On his days off, he plays D&D with his high school friends or plays video games all day. I actually created a resume for him and tried sending it out to some jobs I found online, and he refused to talk to any of the companies and recruiters that contacted him. In fact, he got really angry with me about it and said I had no right to interfere in his life that way. I don't think he's lazy. His boss at the convenience store loves him and says he's a great worker. I think he's unmotivated and has no ambition. I also think he has very low self-esteem. He was horribly bullied in high school because he was super smart but unattractive and lousy at sports, and I know he got told that he was a loser a lot, and I don't think he's ever really gotten over it. I honestly don't know why he even bothered with the master's degree, except that it gave him another 2 years before he had to start adulting. But he's still not adulting 2 years later, and it's starting to really get on my nerves. I can't stand my mother-in-law, and living with her is a nightmare. She expects me to work full-time, give her most of my income after I pay our student loans, then help around the house. She never asks him to do anything, nor does she take his money. She's also horribly verbally abusive to me. If I so much as put a dish out of place in the dishwasher, she goes off on me and he never sticks up for me. I honestly think he's kind of afraid of her. My father-in-law is a long-haul trucker and he's only home about 1 day a week, if that. I do love him, he's funny and kind and caring, but I feel like we're stuck. I want something more than this out of life, and I'm starting to feel like I'm never going to get it as long as I stay with him. And his lack of doing anything with his life is making it really hard for me to respect him. And even though I love him, a lot of the time I don't like him very much anymore. I'm starting to wonder if it's time to cut my losses and leave. Problem is, I'm scared to leave because I went straight from living at home to living at college to living with him. I've never been alone in my life, and the thought of trying to be independent scares me half to death. But I also know that's not a good reason to stick around in a place where I feel like I'm never going to have a chance to live the life I want to live. And I'm terrified that if he's still refusing to adult at 27, he's never going to get there. I would truly love some advice on how to at least attempt to make this marriage work before I give up on it. I've talked to him about it many times. He doesn't seem to get it. He thinks it's enough that he has a job at all, even though it's a dead-end low-income position that is way below what he is capable of doing. He says I'm pushing him into something he doesn't want to do, which is leave his current position in favor of something that would pay better and actually use his skills. Quite honestly, I think he's afraid. He doesn't think he's good enough to do anything other than work at a gas station. His father has also tried to talk to him about how he's wasting his money, his education, his intelligence on a dead-end job, about how he is a disappointment to his parents after all the money they spent on his college degree. His father has also tried to tell him how unfair he is being to me. But nothing seems to get through to him, or maybe he just doesn't want to listen because he doesn't want to change. The sad thing is, he's really smart and a really hard worker. He got fantastic grades at both the undergrad, after he spent a few months in rehab, and the grad level. As a matter of fact, he got a perfect GPA in a very difficult graduate program. He could have gotten a permanent job from the company where he did his internship. They loved him and asked him to stay, but he turned them down. He told me he didn't like the corporate culture there. Now I think that was just an excuse. She insists that we pay rent but says it has to come from me because he can't afford it. According to her, a man needs spending money and therefore he should be allowed to use his income however he sees fit. And yes, she's being a hypocrite because she hasn't worked a day in her life. Married young, had kids young, never worked outside the home, and has always expected her husband and daughters to do most of the work in the home. Now it's me and my sister-in-law, who also still lives at home, she's only 19, who seem to do everything. I don't think the woman even knows how to cook anything that can't be microwaved. He didn't get the pretty girl and we aren't sleeping together. Number 1, because neither one of us is attractive. Number 2, because we are both not needy. We actually met in college through the Student Bodies Pride Association, which we were both very active in. We were both very confused about what we want at the time and hoping to figure out our orientation through the group. We fell very much in love emotionally and intellectually and got together because we loved being together even though we had no physical attraction to each other. And we had a ton of stuff in common. We both loved reading, and sci-fi movies, and RPG, and long drives in the country, and local history, and just so many other things. We just clicked, if you know what I mean. And we did both want kids someday and figured out it would make more sense to have them with someone else who was okay with only sleeping together for purposes of having children. We've had slept together, it did nothing for either one of us, so we stopped. And we've both been with other people in the past with the same results. And I didn't marry him because I thought he was going to be successful financially. His bachelor's degree was in science. He had originally intended to be a high school science teacher, and his grad work was supposed to be in secondary education. Then he got really into coding and decided to do his grad work in software engineering and become a programmer. He aced the program, too, only to have completely lost interest in it almost as soon as he had graduated. But believe me, I wasn't concerned about his future income, considering I thought he was going to be a teacher in a state that pays their teachers crap. A full-time convenience store manager could be considered a steady income with responsibilities. He certainly seems to think it is. He thinks it's unfair of me to push him to find a better job when he likes the job he has. I think he likes his job because it doesn't ask anything of him except to show up and do his regular daily duties, none of which really require him to think much. Sometimes I really feel like he's afraid of things that require him to make an adult-level decision. I really wish he'd get some therapy, but whenever I bring it up, he acts like I'm putting him down or something. He really is scarred from all the bullying he went through during his teen years. Even a slight criticism, he sees as a personal attack. I don't know how to talk to him about trying to make things better without triggering his insecurities. So my husband called me up last night extremely upset. He had to work yesterday and apparently there was some sort of expectation that I was never informed, that I would take care of making sure his mother had a proper Mother's Day. Gifts, flowers, dinner out, etc., despite the fact that both of her daughters were home even though my H and my Phil were not. Daughters apparently did nothing. They are both mentally ill, so I'm not that surprised. MIL was furious and completely went off on them. And now 19-year-old Sil is back on the suicide ward because she flipped out and tried to slit her wrists again. The family, my H included, has apparently decided this is all my fault for going away for the weekend so that I wasn't there to babysit them. And even though my head tells me that's a bunch of BS, I feel really guilty for not taking into account how bad mother-in-law can be to sis-in-law when there's no one there to watch out for her. Husband has informed me that if Sil had died, her blood would be on my hands. I feel absolutely horrible about the whole thing, but at the same time it pretty much confirms my belief that it's time to be out of this marriage. I was talking to one of my coworkers this morning who deals in family court cases, and she basically told me that I am not responsible for trying to keep his dysfunctional family semi-functional. And she and I are going to sit down later and start drafting papers for a legal separation, required for a full year in my state before you can divorce. She's also going to help me try to get my two sister-in-laws out of that abusive household before they both end up ex themselves. My comment: it's great that you're sympathetic and want to help your sister-in-laws, but you need to be very careful and forward-thinking. You do not want to put yourself in a position of responsibility, or even become an advocate of any sort in regards to the sis-in-law. You could end up tying yourself to that family forever. You're way too young to do that to yourself. Your best option is to get as far away from that family as possible.